Officer had been patrolling the streets of Jacksonville, Florida for 15 years, and he developed what his colleagues called the sense and almost supernatural ability to spot trouble before it fully revealed itself. On this particular August evening, the humidity hung thick in the air like a wet blanket, and the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sat in his patrol car with Rex, his 4-year-old German Shepherd K9 partner, parked in the lot of a gas station off Interstate 95, watching the steady stream of traffic flow past. Rex was one of the best narcotics and search dogs in the Jacksonville Police Department. The powerful canine had been responsible for dozens of significant busts, finding everything from hidden cocaine stashes to missing persons. But more than his professional accomplishments, Rex had become his closest companion. The officer lived alone after his divorce 3 years prior, and Rex had filled a void in his life that he hadn't even realized existed. They understood each other with barely a word or gesture needed. "Just a couple more hours, buddy," said, scratching Rex behind the ears. The dog's tail thumped against the back seat in response. That's when noticed the silver Civic approaching the intersection. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual, just another vehicle in the endless parade of cars traveling through Jacksonville. But then saw it. The right tail light was completely shattered, with only the left one functioning. It was a minor traffic violation, the kind officers dealt with dozens of times per shift. But it was also a legitimate reason for a stop. Pulled out onto the highway, activating his lights. They didn't pull over immediately. It continued for almost a quarter mile before finally easing onto the shoulder. That delay, noted, was the first red flag. Most drivers pulled over within seconds of seeing those flashing blue lights. As approached the vehicle with Rex on a lead beside him, he began his automatic assessment. The car had California plates, a long way from Florida. The bumper had a few dents, and the vehicle looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. Through the driver's window, he could see a woman in her late 20s, her brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. But it was her eyes that caught attention, wide, darting, filled with what looked like barely controlled panic. "Good evening, ma'am," said in his professional but friendly tone. "I pulled you over because your right tail light is out. License and registration, please." The woman's hands trembled so violently that she could barely open her purse. I didn't know it was out," she stammered, her voice thin and high-pitched. "I'm sorry, officer. I've been driving all day and—" "It's okay, ma'am. Just your license and registration." As the woman fumbled through her glove compartment, his gaze shifted to the back seat, and his heart skipped a beat. A tiny girl, probably about 3 years old, sat strapped in a car seat. She wore a stained pink dress and her hair was tangled and unkempt. But it was her eyes that struck, enormous blue eyes that seemed far too knowing, far too serious for such a young child. She clutched a worn stuffed rabbit against her chest, and she wasn't looking at. She was staring intently at Rex. Most children reacted to Rex in one of two ways. Either they were excited and wanted to pet him, or they were frightened and shied away. This little girl did neither. She simply watched the dog with an intensity that seemed almost desperate, as if she were trying to communicate something through sheer force of will. "Here," the woman said, thrusting documents at with shaking hands. The license read Sarah Mitchell, age 28, California driver's license. The registration matched the vehicle. "Ms. Mitchell, are you feeling all right?" asked, his concern genuine. "You seem very nervous." "I'm fine," Sarah said quickly, too quickly. "Just tired. We've been on the road for 2 days straight, moving to Florida, new start, you know." Nodded slowly, glancing again at the little girl in the back. "And who's this?" "My daughter, Emma, she's 3. The child, Emma, still hadn't taken her eyes off Rex. The German Shepherd, for his part, was behaving oddly as well. Instead of sitting calmly beside as he'd been trained to do, Rex kept pulling slightly toward the vehicle, his attention fixed on the little girl. His tail gave small, uncertain wags, and he whimpered softly, something I'd rarely heard him do on duty. "Ms. Mitchell, would you mind stepping out of the vehicle for a moment?" asked. Sarah's face went pale. "Why? I gave you my license. The taillight's just broken. I'll get it fixed tomorrow, I promise." "It's just procedure, ma'am. I need to verify some information. It'll only take a minute." As Sarah reluctantly opened her door and stepped out, noticed several things at once. Her clothes were wrinkled and stained. She had dark circles under her eyes suggesting days without proper sleep, and most tellingly, she kept glancing nervously at the back seat, as if worried about what the child might do or say. Rex suddenly pulled harder on his lead, moving toward the rear passenger window where Emma sat, allowed the dog to approach, curious about his partner's unusual behavior. That's when the little girl did something that would change everything. She pressed her small palms against the window glass, leaning as close to Rex as the barrier would allow. Her enormous blue eyes filled with tears, and then, in a voice barely loud enough to hear through the glass, she spoke two words that made the entire world stop spinning. "Help me." Froze, time seemed to slow down. Those two words, spoken in such a small, desperate voice, carried the weight of 1,000 screams. Every instinct had developed over 15 years of police work suddenly fired at once. This wasn't a routine traffic stop anymore. This was something far more sinister. Rex reacted immediately, whimpering and pawing at the car door, his professional training momentarily forgotten in what seemed like a desperate attempt to reach the child. The dog's behavior confirmed what's gut was screaming. This little girl was in terrible danger. Sarah Mitchell's reaction sealed it. Her face drained of all color, transforming from pale to ghostly white. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Her eyes darted from to the child to the highway, clearly calculating whether she could run. "Ma'am," said, his voice now firm and commanding as his hand instinctively moved toward his weapon. "I'm going to need you to place your hands on the hood of your vehicle right now." Within seconds had radioed for immediate backup, his heart pounding as he kept one eye on Sarah and the other on the little girl in the back seat. Emma, if that was even her real name, still had her hands pressed against the glass, tears now streaming down her small face. As the sound of approaching sirens filled the air, knew with absolute certainty that this was no ordinary traffic stop. Those two words from a 3-year-old child had just blown open a case that would soon make headlines across the entire nation. The Florida heat seemed to intensify in the moments following those two devastating words. Heart hammered against his as he kept Sarah Mitchell's trembling form in his peripheral vision, while his eyes remained locked on the small girl in the backseat. Rex continued his agitated whimpering, scratching at the car door with an urgency had never witnessed in their 4 years as partners. "Step away from the vehicle, ma'am. Hands where I can see them," commanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Sarah's legs seemed to give out slightly and she stumbled backward, her hands rising shakily into the air. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You don't understand. She needs me. I'm all she has." Those words sent another chill down spine. Something about the way Sarah said it, the possessive desperation, the pleading tone, felt profoundly wrong. This wasn't a mother concerned about her child's. This was something else entirely. The approaching sirens grew louder, and within 90 seconds, 2 additional patrol cars screamed onto the shoulder, their blue lights strobing across the darkening highway. Officer Jennifer, a 10-year veteran, emerged from the first vehicle, her hand resting on her weapon as she quickly assessed the scene. She called out, her dark eyes sharp and alert. "Need you to secure the driver," said without taking his eyes off Sarah. "I've got a possible child endangerment situation, maybe worse." Jennifer moved with practiced efficiency, approaching Sarah with caution. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back." "No, no, no," Sarah began to sob, her composure completely shattered. "You can't take her from me. Not again. I can't lose another baby. I can't." "Another baby?" filed that statement away as he moved toward the rear passenger door. Through the window, he could see Emma more clearly now. The little girl's face was streaked with tears, but her expression held something remarkable, a mixture of hope and terror, as if she understood that this moment was pivotal but couldn't be sure which way it would fall. Carefully opened the door, and Rex immediately pushed forward, but not in his typical aggressive search manner. Instead, the German shepherd approached the little girl with a gentleness that took breath away. Rex placed his massive head on the edge of the car seat, and Emma immediately reached out with her tiny hands, burying her fingers in his fur. "Good doggy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Good doggy helps." Knelt beside the open door, making himself small and non-threatening. He'd had basic training in speaking with children, but this situation felt far beyond anything he'd prepared for. "Hi there, sweetheart," he said softly. "My name is, and this is Rex. You're very brave. Can you tell me your name?" The little girl's enormous blue eyes shifted from Rex to, and he saw her internal struggle playing out across her small features. She glanced toward where Sarah was now being handcuffed by Officer, then back to Emma, she said quietly, then her small face scrunched up in concentration, as if she were trying to remember something very important. "No, Lily, I'm Lily." The name hit like a physical blow. Emma or Lily, two names for one child. His mind raced through the possibilities, but one stood out with terrifying clarity. This child didn't know her own name because someone had tried to make her forget it. "Lily is a beautiful name," said gently, his throat tight with emotion. "Lily, has anyone hurt you? Are you safe with the lady who was driving?" Lily's eyes filled with fresh tears. "She's nice sometimes, but she gets sad and angry. She says I'm Emma, but I remember Mama and Dada, real Mama and Dada." Behind him heard Sarah's anguished wail. "She doesn't remember, she was too little. I'm her mother now, I saved her." Officer secured Sarah in the back of her patrol car as continued his conversation with Lily. Every word from the child's mouth was building a picture that made his stomach turn. This wasn't Sarah's daughter. This was a kidnapped child who had somehow managed to hold onto fragments of her real identity. "Lily, you are so brave," said, fighting to keep his voice calm and reassuring. "We're going to help you, I promise. Can you stay with Rex for just a minute while I check on something?" Lily nodded, her small hand still buried in Rex's fur. The dog seemed to understand his role perfectly, remaining absolutely still and calm, providing comfort through his mere presence. Stood and moved to the trunk of the Officer joined him, her face grim. "What are we dealing with here?" "I think we've got an abducted child," said quietly. "She told me her name is Lily, not Emma. Said she remembers her real Mama and Dada. The driver just said something about another baby and saving the girl." "Jesus," Jennifer breathed. "You want to search the vehicle?" Nodded. "We've got probable cause with the child's statement. Let's see what we find." Sarah was screaming from the patrol car now, her voice muffled but still audible. "Don't look in there. You don't understand what I've been through. She needed me. My Emma needed me." The two officers exchanged a look, popped the trunk, and both directed their flashlights into the space. At first glance, it appeared normal enough. A spare tire, some grocery bags, a small suitcase. But's trained eye noticed something off about the trunk's depth. It seemed shallower than it should be. He pressed against the carpeted floor panel, and it gave slightly. "There's a compartment here," he said, his pulse quickening. Together, they lifted the panel. Beneath it, in a space typically reserved for the spare tire well, they found a manila envelope and a small duffel bag. Carefully opened the envelope, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Inside were documents, lots of them. A birth certificate for Emma Mitchell that looked far too new and pristine. A social security card with slightly smudged ink, as if it had been printed rather than issued officially. Medical records that seemed fabricated. And then, crumpled at the bottom of the envelope, a piece of paper that made hands shake. It was an Amber Alert poster, worn and faded as if it had been handled many times. The photograph showed a toddler with enormous blue eyes, unmistakably the same child currently sitting in the back seat. But the name on the poster wasn't Emma Mitchell. Lily read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Age 2 at time of disappearance. Missing from Sacramento, California. Last seen, June 15th, 14 months ago. Jennifer leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Oh my God, this is that case. I remember seeing it on the news. They thought she was dead. The parents. They've been searching for over a year. His mind reeled. 14 months. This little girl had been missing for 14 months, living under a false identity with a woman who had clearly kidnapped her. And somehow, through all that time, through whatever Sarah Mitchell had done to try to make her forget, Lily had held onto the memory of her real parents. She had remembered enough to know she needed help. And when she saw a police officer and his K-9 partner, she had found the courage to say those two critical words. Help me. Returned to the car where Lily still sat with Rex, and his heart broke as he looked at her small, hopeful face. This child had endured more than any 3-year-old should ever have to experience, yet here she was, brave and resilient. Lily said softly, kneeling once again beside the door, we're going to take you somewhere safe now, and then we're going to find your real mama and Dada. Would you like that? The smile that broke across Lily's face was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Really, real mama and Dada. Really, promised, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. I promise. As additional units arrived and the scene became a full investigation, watched as a child services worker gently lifted Lily from the car seat. The little girl reached back for Rex and made a split-second decision. Rex goes with her, he told his supervisor. That dog is the reason she felt safe enough to ask for help. They stay together until we sort this out. No one argued. As watched Lily being carried to a waiting vehicle, her small hand still reaching out to touch Rex who walked alongside, he knew that this moment would define his entire career. 2 words from a 3-year-old had just cracked open a case that the entire nation had given up on. And somewhere in California, 2 parents who had spent 14 months in unbearable agony were about to receive a phone call that would bring their daughter back from the dead. The Jacksonville Police Department's investigation unit had transformed into a command center within an hour of Lily's discovery. Detective Sarah Michaels, a 20-year veteran of the Missing Persons Division, had been called in from her daughter's birthday party, still wearing her casual jeans and a sweater. Now she sat across from Harding, the woman who had called herself Sarah Mitchell for the past 14 months, in a stark interrogation room illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights. Had stopped crying. Her face had gone blank, almost catatonic, as if her mind had retreated to somewhere safer than the reality closing in around her. Her wrists bore the red marks from handcuffs, though they'd been removed for the interview. A court-appointed attorney sat beside her, a young public defender named Tom Harrison, who looked overwhelmed by the magnitude of the case that had just landed in his lap. Detective Michaels said gently, using the woman's real name for the first time, "We know who you are. We know who Lily is. We've already contacted her parents in California. What we need to understand now is why. Help us understand what happened." His eyes, which had been staring at nothing, slowly focused on the detective. When she spoke, her voice was flat, emotionless, as if she were recounting someone else's story. "I was at the mall, the Sacramento Valley Fair Mall. It was hot that day, so hot." Detective Michaels leaned forward slightly, her recorder capturing every word. This was June of last year. June 15th, confirmed, the date obviously seared into her memory. I had been watching them for weeks, the perfect family, the mother who had everything I'd lost, the beautiful daughter who looked so much like my Emma. The detective's stomach clenched. "Tell me about your Emma." For the first time, emotion cracked through his facade. Her eyes filled with tears and her voice broke. She drowned, My baby girl drowned in our backyard pool. She was 4 years old, 4 years, 3 months, and 12 days old. Hands clenched into fists on the table. I looked away for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I went inside to answer the phone. When I came back, she couldn't finish the sentence. Tom Harrison placed a hand on his client's shoulder, but she didn't seem to notice. My husband left me 3 days after the funeral, continued, her words tumbling out now like water from a broken dam. He said it was my fault. He said I killed our daughter through negligence. The police investigation cleared me. It was ruled an accidental drowning, but Mark never forgave me. He filed for divorce and moved to Oregon. I never saw him again. Detective Michaels made notes, her expression carefully neutral despite the sympathy she felt. What happened after your husband left? I fell apart, said simply. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face under the water. I started going to therapy, got prescribed antidepressants, but nothing helped. Nothing could bring my baby back. She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. And then about 8 months after Emma died, I saw them at the grocery store, Jennifer and her daughter. The little girl was laughing, riding in the shopping cart, and she had hair just like my Emma. Same blue eyes. Same smile. So you began following them, Detective Michaels stated rather than asked. Nodded slowly. At first I just wanted to watch, to see what a happy mother and daughter looked like, to remember what I'd lost. But then it became more. I started learning their routine. I knew when Jennifer took Lily to the park. I knew which mall they visited on weekends. I knew everything about them. In another room, stood behind a two-way mirror, watching the interrogation alongside FBI Special Agent Robert, who had been called in given the interstate nature of the kidnapping. Still felt the adrenaline from the traffic stop coursing through his system, but now it was mixed with a sick feeling in his stomach as he listened to his confession. She premeditated this for months, Agent said quietly, his arms crossed over his chest. This wasn't a crime of opportunity or a mental break. This was calculated. Nodded grimly. What happens to her? Federal charges, kidnapping across state lines, child endangerment, falsifying documents. She's looking at decades in prison, probably life. Glanced at. You did good work out there, officer. That little girl is alive because you trusted your instincts. In the interrogation room, Detective Michaels pressed forward. Tell me about the day you took Lily. June 15th. What happened? His eyes took on a distant quality, as if she were watching a movie of someone else's actions. Jennifer parked her SUV near the north entrance of the mall. She was on her phone, distracted. Lily was strapped in her car seat in the back. Jennifer got out, still talking on the phone, and walked around to get shopping bags from the trunk. Her back was to the passenger side for maybe 30 seconds. That's all I needed. The detective felt her jaw clench. You took Lily from her car seat in 30 seconds. I'd practiced, said without emotion. I knew those car seat buckles. I had one just like it for Emma. I opened the door, unbuckled her, picked her up, and walked away. Simple, quick. Jennifer didn't even realize her daughter was gone until she opened the back door to get her out. By then, I was already across the parking lot, putting Lily into my car. And Lily, did she cry? Did she resist? She asked for her mommy, said, and for a moment, something like guilt flickered across her face. She was scared. She cried for almost an hour while I drove, but I talked to her, sang to her, told her everything was going to be okay. I told her I was her new mommy and we were going on an adventure. Detective Michaels fought to keep her professional composure. You drove straight out of California. I'd already prepared everything, explained. I had fake IDs, a birth certificate for Emma Mitchell, cash I'd been saving for months. I'd rented an apartment in Arizona under the fake name weeks before. I knew exactly what to do. She paused, looking directly at the detective. I'm not stupid, detective. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. Every time I looked at her, I saw my Emma getting a second chance at life. I saw myself getting a second chance at being a mother. So you spent 14 months moving from state to state. the detective said, consulting her notes. Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and finally Florida, always using the name Sarah Mitchell, always keeping Lily isolated. Emma corrected automatically. I called her Emma, and yes, I homeschooled her, kept her away from other children, from anyone who might ask questions. We moved every 3 or 4 months, always paid rent in cash, never stayed anywhere long enough for people to get curious. She laughed bitterly. I thought I was being so careful. I thought I could actually pull it off. What made you come to Florida? Agent asked through the intercom, his voice piping into the interrogation room. Looked up at the speaker. I saw news about a cold case unit in Sacramento reopening Lily's investigation. They were going to interview people again, look at surveillance footage with new technology. I panicked. I thought if I went far enough away, to the opposite corner of the country, maybe they'd never find us. Maybe we could finally stop running and just be a family. Detective Michaels leaned back in her chair. I need to ask you something important. Did you ever hurt Lily? Physically abuse her in any way? No, response was immediate and vehement. Never, I would never hurt her. I loved her. I love her. She was my daughter. Yes, I kept her isolated, and yes, I lied to her about who she was, but I never laid a hand on her. I fed her, clothed her, read her bedtime stories. I was a good mother to her. Except you weren't her mother, Detective Michaels said quietly. You stole someone else's child and tried to erase her identity. For the first time, composure completely crumbled. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. I know. God help me, I know, but I couldn't bring my Emma back, and I couldn't live without her. When I saw Lily, it felt like the universe was giving me a second chance. I thought I was saving both of us. The detective stood, gathering her files. Harding, you're being charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, interstate flight to avoid prosecution, and falsifying federal documents. The FBI will be taking over this case. Is there anything else you want to tell us? Looked up, her face ravaged by tears. Just tell Lily I'm sorry. Tell her I loved her, and tell her real parents. Tell them she's an incredibly brave little girl. Every night she would whisper something before falling asleep. I could never quite hear what she was saying, but now I know. She was saying their names. She never forgot them, no matter how hard I tried to make her forget. She held onto them the whole time. As Detective Michaels left the interrogation room, she found waiting in the hallway with Agent. The three of them stood in silence for a moment, processing what they'd just heard. That woman is deeply damaged, Agent said finally. But damage doesn't excuse what she did. She systematically planned and executed the kidnapping of a child, then spent over a year evading law enforcement while psychologically manipulating that child to forget her real identity. And yet Lily remembered, said softly. A 2-year-old child held onto the memory of her parents for 14 months, through everything put her through. That's incredible. Detective Michaels nodded. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for. Lily's parents clearly did something right in those first 2 years. They built a foundation of love so strong that even Harding couldn't completely destroy it. Down the hall, in a child-friendly interview room decorated with colorful murals and filled with toys, Lily sat on a soft cushion with Rex lying beside her, his head resting on her lap. A child psychologist named Dr. Williams sat nearby, gently asking questions and taking notes while Lily talked about her adventure with the sad lady. The sad lady cried a lot, Lily explained in her small voice, petting Rex's fur rhythmically. She said I was Emma, but I'm not Emma, I'm Lily. I remembered because Mama and Dada always said, Lily, you're our special girl. I said it every night so I wouldn't forget. Dr. Williams blinked back tears. You're very smart, Lily. When I saw the doggy with the policeman, Lily continued, I remembered Mama said police help when you're scared. So I said help me to the doggy. Through the observation window, watched and felt his throat tighten with emotion. This little girl, barely more than a toddler, had survived an ordeal that would have broken many adults. And now, The moment everyone was preparing for approached rapidly. Somewhere above Florida, a plane carrying Jennifer and David was descending toward Jacksonville International Airport. The impossible reunion was about to begin. 3,000 miles away, just hours before that fateful traffic stop, Jennifer had been sitting in her home office in Sacramento, surrounded by the remnants of a life put on hold. The room had become a shrine to her missing daughter, walls papered with missing person flyers, a corkboard covered in red string connecting locations and potential, and 3 large binders filled with every piece of information related to Lily's disappearance. The computer screen glowed with Lily's Facebook page, Bring Lily Home, which had accumulated over 2 million followers in 14 months. Jennifer's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she prepared to write her daily update, a ritual she'd maintained without fail since the day Lily vanished. Her eyes were hollow, ringed with dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. At 32 years old, she looked closer to 50, her face aged by grief and the relentless passage of time without answers. Day 428, she typed slowly. Still searching, still believing, still waiting for my baby girl to come home. House was quiet, too quiet. Her husband David was at work. He'd returned to his position as an architect 6 months after Lily's disappearance, unable to sustain the financial burden of both of them being unemployed. Someone had to keep the lights on, keep the private investigators paid, keep the reward fund growing. But Jennifer couldn't go back. How could she return to her job as an elementary school teacher when every child she saw was a reminder of the daughter who should be in preschool now? Her phone sat on the desk beside her, positioned at the perfect angle so she could see the screen at all times. Even after 428 days, she jumped at every notification, every call, every text message. Hope and dread had become 2 sides of the same coin, flipping endlessly in her chest. The living room downstairs remained exactly as it had been on June 15th of the previous year. Lily's toys were scattered across the floor, a tea set they'd been playing with that morning, picture books stacked beside the couch, a stuffed elephant that Lily called sitting on the coffee table. David had suggested, gently, that maybe they should put some things away. But Jennifer couldn't. Touching Lily's toys felt like admitting she might never come back to play with them. Jennifer's sister had tried to get her to see a therapist. "You're destroying yourself," had said just last week, her voice breaking with concern. "Jen, you need to accept the possibility that Lily might not." "Don't," Jennifer had cut her off sharply. "Don't you dare say it. She's alive. I know she's alive. I'm her mother. I would feel it if she were gone." But as the months stretched on, even Jennifer's conviction had begun to crack. The police had been sympathetic but realistic. Detective, the lead investigator, visited less frequently now. The FBI had scaled back their involvement after the first 6 months when all leads went cold. The media had moved on to newer tragedies. Even the social media attention had begun to wane. Posts that used to get thousands of shares now barely reached a few hundred. The hardest part was the guilt that consumed Jennifer like a slow-burning fire. She'd been on the phone with her mother that day, distracted for just 30 seconds while she grabbed shopping bags from the trunk. 30 seconds. That's all it took for her entire world to collapse. She turned around, opened the back door to unbuckle Lily from her car seat, and found it empty. The scream that had torn from her throat still echoed in her nightmares. The security footage from the mall had shown a woman, brown hair, average height, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, walking quickly across the parking lot carrying a small child. The woman had disappeared into a vehicle parked 3 rows away, and by the time security reviewed the footage, she was long gone. The license plate was obscured. The car, a silver, was one of the most common vehicles in California. The woman's face was never clearly visible. For months, Jennifer had watched that footage obsessively, frame by frame, trying to see something the investigators had missed. Who was this woman? Why had she taken Lily? Was it random or had they been targeted? The questions spiraled endlessly, never finding answers. The investigation had generated hundreds of tips. Jennifer and David had followed up on every single one, driving to neighboring states, showing Lily's picture to strangers, posting flyers in truck stops and rest areas across the western United States. They'd appeared on national news programs, pleading for information. They'd increased the reward to $250,000, their life savings, money borrowed from family, funds raised through the Facebook page. Nothing had brought Lily home. Detective had told them as gently as possible that after the first few months, the chances of finding a kidnapped child alive dropped dramatically. "I'm not saying give up hope," he'd said, his weathered face full of sympathy. "But you need to prepare yourselves for the possibility that we might never find her, or that when we do." He hadn't finished the sentence. He hadn't needed to. Jennifer glanced at the clock. 7:45 p.m. Pacific Time. In 15 minutes, she would join a Zoom support group for parents of missing children, another ritual in her carefully constructed routine of grief and determination. These parents understood in a way no one else could, the specific agony of not knowing, the torture of hope without resolution, the guilt that gnawed at your insides like a living thing. David would be home by 9:00 p.m. He would find her here, as he did every night, surrounded by evidence of their loss. He would try to get her to eat something, and she would push food around a plate before giving up. They would sit together in silence, both lost in their own versions of hell, both unable to bridge the chasm of grief that had opened between them. Their marriage had become a ghost of what it once was. They loved each other. Jennifer was certain of that. But Lily's absence had created a wound too deep for love alone to heal. Every conversation eventually circled back to her. Every silence was filled with her memory. They'd stopped sleeping in the same bed 6 months ago. David had moved to the guest room after too many nights of Jennifer's screams waking them both as nightmares replayed the kidnapping in endless, horrific variations. Jennifer clicked on a new tab, pulling up the Sacramento Police Department's cold case website. Just last week, she'd learned that they were reopening Lily's investigation with new technology, advanced facial recognition software, enhanced video analysis, fresh eyes on old evidence. It was something, a spark of hope in the darkness. Her phone buzzed, and Jennifer's heart lurched as it always did. But it was just a notification from the Facebook page, someone sharing Lily's picture with a message of support. Jennifer had learned to be grateful for these small acts of kindness from strangers who refused to forget her daughter. She was about to close the laptop and prepare for the support group when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a Florida area code she didn't recognize. Jennifer's hand trembled as she answered, her voice barely a whisper. "Hello, Mrs. Jennifer." The voice was male, professional, careful. "Yes, this is she. Who is this?" "Mrs., my name is Special Agent Robert with the FBI's Jacksonville field office. I'm calling about your daughter, Lily." The world tilted sideways. Jennifer gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles white. "What about Lily? Did you find her body?" She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. 14 months of dread crystallized into this single moment. "Mrs., we found your daughter alive. She was recovered during a traffic stop approximately 2 hours ago. She's safe, healthy, and asking for you and your husband." The words didn't make sense. Jennifer's brain couldn't process them. What did you say?" "Your daughter is alive, Mrs. Lily is alive. We have her in protective custody here in Jacksonville, Florida. We need you and your husband to come immediately. We can arrange flights." Jennifer didn't hear the rest. The phone slipped from her hand, clattering onto the desk as a sound emerged from her throat, something between a sob and a scream, a release of 14 months of agony compressed into a single moment. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor, her body shaking with sobs so violent they felt like they might tear her apart. "Jen, Jen," David's voice came from downstairs. He'd come home early. His footsteps pounded up the stairs, and then he was there, dropping to his knees beside her, his hands on her shoulders. "What happened? What's wrong?" Jennifer couldn't speak. She pointed at the phone on the desk, where Agent's voice was still calling out, "Mrs., are you there?" David grabbed the phone, his face pale with fear. "This is David. What's going on? Is my wife okay?" Jennifer watched her husband's face as he listened to the FBI agent repeat the impossible words. She watched the confusion, the disbelief, and then, finally, the dawning of hope that they'd both forbidden themselves to feel for so long. David's legs buckled and he sat down hard on the floor beside Jennifer, the phone still pressed to his ear. Tears streamed down his face, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. "She's alive," he finally managed to say. "Our Lily is alive." Jennifer reached for him, and they clung to each other on the floor of that shrine to their missing daughter, sobbing and laughing simultaneously, unable to believe that the nightmare might actually be ending. "We'll be on the next flight," David said into the phone, his voice breaking. "Whatever it takes, we're coming. Tell her we're coming." As David made frantic arrangements, calling his brother to drive them to the airport, booking emergency flights, throwing clothes into a suitcase, Jennifer sat on the floor, staring at the walls covered in her daughter's face. All those months of searching, of refusing to give up, of holding on to hope when everyone else had let it go. She'd been right. A mother's instinct had been right. Lily was alive. Their baby girl was alive and waiting for them. And nothing, not 3,000 miles, not 14 months of separation, not whatever horrors her daughter had endured, would keep Jennifer from reaching her now. At 11:47 p.m. Pacific Time, Jennifer and David boarded a red-eye flight to Jacksonville, their hands clasped together, both afraid that if they let go, this dream might evaporate like all the false hopes before it. Somewhere in Florida, their daughter was falling asleep beside a German shepherd named Rex, whispering the name she'd never forgotten. "Mama, Dada, coming home." Florida Department of Children and Families building in Jacksonville had never felt more charged with anticipation. Staff members who'd worked there for decades said they'd never witnessed anything quite like this. The recovery of a child who'd been missing for over a year, presumed dead by many, now waiting to be reunited with parents who'd crossed the country in the middle of the night. Dr. Williams, the child psychologist who'd been with Lily throughout the night, had carefully prepared the reunion room. Soft lighting replaced the harsh fluorescence. Toys and books were scattered around to make the space feel less institutional. A comfortable couch had been brought in, along with pillows and blankets. But the room's most important occupant was Rex, the German shepherd who'd become Lily's emotional anchor, lying beside a small bed where the 3-year-old had finally fallen asleep around midnight. She kept asking when Mama and Dada were coming, Dr. Williams told the assembled team as they waited for the arrival. Every few minutes, the same question. When I told her they were on an airplane flying to see her, she seemed to accept that. She understands the concept of waiting. Stood near the back of the room, still in his uniform despite the fact that his shift had ended 8 hours ago. He couldn't leave. Not yet. Not until he saw this through. Rex technically should have been back at the K-9 unit but had pulled strings with his supervisor. The dog stayed with Lily. "How is she really?" Jennifer asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. "Psychologically, I mean, after 14 months with her kidnapper." Dr. Williams considered her answer carefully. "Remarkably resilient, which speaks to the strong attachment she formed with her parents in those first 2 years. Harding didn't physically abuse her, which is significant. But the psychological impact of being separated from her parents, having her identity systematically erased, being kept isolated, those wounds will take time to heal." She paused, glancing at the sleeping child. "That said, Lily demonstrates an extraordinary strength of spirit. She held onto her real identity in the face of someone trying to convince her otherwise. That's not just luck, that's will." At 6:23 a.m., as the Florida sun began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, a black SUV pulled into the DCF parking lot. Watched through the window as 2 figures emerged, moving with the desperate urgency of parents who'd been separated from their child for 429 days. Jennifer looked exactly like her photographs: shoulder-length dark hair, petite frame, eyes that had seen too much sorrow. But it was the expression on her face that struck, pure, undiluted hope mixed with terror, as if she was afraid to believe this was real. David had his arm around his wife's shoulders, supporting her as they moved toward the entrance. He was tall, with glasses and the exhausted look of someone who hadn't slept in days. Agent met them at the door, speaking in low, gentle tones. "Mr. and Mrs., thank you for coming so quickly. Before we take you to Lily, I need to prepare you for a few things." "Is she hurt?" Jennifer interrupted, her voice cracking. "Please just tell us if she's hurt." "She's not hurt," assured them quickly. "Physically, she's healthy. A bit underweight, but nothing concerning. Emotionally," he chose his words carefully, "she's been through a traumatic experience. She may seem different from the 2-year-old you remember. She's had 14 months of growth and development under very unusual circumstances. We have a child psychologist who will guide you through this reunion." "I don't care if she's different," David said firmly, his jaw set. "She's our daughter. We just need to see her, please." Dr. Williams stepped forward, introducing herself. "Mr. and Mrs. Lily has been asking for you constantly. She remembers you both clearly, which is remarkable given her age when she was taken. However, I want to manage your expectations. She may be shy at first. She may need time to readjust. Or," Dr. Williams smiled slightly, "she may surprise us all. Children are unpredictable." "Can we see her now?" Jennifer's voice was barely above a whisper, her entire body trembling. "Please, I need to see my baby." Dr. Williams nodded and led them down a hallway painted in cheerful yellows and blues, covered with children's artwork. Every step felt like an eternity to Jennifer and David. They held hands so tightly their knuckles had gone white. The door to the reunion room was partially open. Through it, they could see a small bed where a haired child slept, and beside her, a large German shepherd keeping watch. "That's Rex," said softly, having followed the group. "He's been with Lily since the traffic stop. She feels safe with him." Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth as she got her first glimpse of her daughter in over a year. "Oh God," she breathed. "She's so big. She's grown so much." Lily had indeed grown. The chubby-cheeked toddler from the Amber Alert photos had lengthened into a preschooler, her face thinner, her limbs longer. But there was no question, this was their daughter. Dr. Williams moved quietly into the room and gently touched Lily's shoulder. "Lily, sweetheart, it's time to wake up. Someone very special is here to see you." Lily's eyes fluttered open, confused for a moment as she oriented herself to her surroundings. Her hand immediately reached for Rex, fingers tangling in his fur. Then she saw the two figures standing in the doorway, backlit by the hallway lights. For a moment everything froze. Lily's eyes widened, her small mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. Jennifer and David stood paralyzed, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid that any sudden motion might shatter this fragile moment. And then Lily's face transformed. Recognition flooded her features, pure, absolute, joyful recognition. "Mama!" she screamed, her voice piercing the careful quiet of the room. "Dada!" She scrambled out of the bed, her small legs tangling in the blankets, and launched herself toward her parents with the full force of her 3-year-old body. Jennifer dropped to her knees, her arms opening wide, and caught her daughter against her chest with a sob that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. "Lily, oh Lily, my baby, my sweet baby girl," Jennifer gasped, her tears soaking into Lily's hair as she held her daughter so tightly it seemed she might never let go. David collapsed beside them, his arms wrapping around both his wife and daughter, his broad shoulders shaking with sobs. "Lily Bear," he choked out, using the nickname he'd given her as an infant. "Our Lily Bear, you came back to us." "Mama, you came." Lily was crying too, her small face pressed against Jennifer's neck. "I waited, I remembered. I said your names every night like you teached me. Taught you, Jennifer corrected automatically, then laughed through her tears at the absurdity of correcting grammar in this moment. Oh, sweetheart, yes, you remembered. You're such a smart, brave girl, so brave. The sad lady said I was Emma, but I'm not Emma. Lily pulled back slightly to look at her parents' faces, her small hands patting their cheeks as if to confirm they were real. I'm Lily, and you're my real mama and dada, and I didn't forget even though the sad lady wanted me to. Around them, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Wiped his face with the back of his hand, not ashamed of his tears. Dr. Williams clutched her clipboard to her chest, her professional composure cracking. Even Agent, who'd worked dozens of kidnapping cases, had to turn away for a moment to compose himself. Rex, sensing that his job was done, padded quietly over to who knelt and buried his face in the dog's fur. Good boy, whispered. Such a good boy. You saved her. For the next hour, the reunion room became a bubble outside of time. Lily sat between her parents on the couch, touching their faces, playing with Jennifer's hair, asking David to lift her up like he used to. She chattered constantly, pouring out 14 months of stored-up words, jumping from topic to topic the way young children do. I missed you every day, Lily said seriously, her small hands holding both her parents' hands. The sad lady was nice sometimes, but she wasn't you. She cried a lot. She had a little girl named Emma who went to heaven, and she was very sad about it. Jennifer and David exchanged glances over their daughter's head. Even at 3 years old, Lily had understood something about Harding's pain, even as she'd been its victim. Sweetie, we're going to need to ask you some questions about your time with the sad lady, David said gently. Not right now, but soon. Is that okay? Lily nodded, then her face brightened. Can Rex come with me? Rex is my friend. He's a good doggy who helps people. Stepped forward. Lily, Rex and I are partners. We work together, but I promise you can visit him anytime you want, okay? Lily seemed to consider this, then nodded solemnly. Okay, because Rex helped me when I was scared. I said help me, and he knew I needed help. You were very brave to ask for help, Jennifer said, fresh tears streaming down her face. So brave. As the morning progressed, Dr. Williams began the gentle process of conducting forensic interviews with Lily. This had to be done carefully. The testimony of a 3-year-old was challenging enough without traumatizing her further. The interviews took place over several sessions, with frequent breaks, and always with Rex nearby and at least one parent present. What emerged was a picture of 14 months in captivity that was both better and worse than investigators had feared. Had never physically harmed Lily, had fed her and cared for her basic needs. But the psychological manipulation had been constant and insidious. Had told Lily that her old parents didn't want her anymore, that Jennifer and David had given her away. She'd moved them constantly, keeping Lily isolated from other children, from schools, from anyone who might recognize her or ask questions. But had made one critical miscalculation. She'd underestimated the bond between Lily and her real parents, and she'd underestimated the power of a 2-year-old's memory. Every night after the sad lady went asleep, I whispered Mama and Dada, Lily explained during one interview, her voice small but clear. I closed my eyes really tight and remembered Mama's songs, Dada's tickles, our house with the yellow kitchen, the elephant. At the mention of the stuffed elephant, Jennifer's breath caught. Is at home waiting for you, sweetheart. She missed you so much. I missed her too, Lily said seriously. And I missed my room and my toys and my books and my park. The sad lady didn't let me go to parks very much. The medical examination confirmed what Dr. Williams had suspected. Lily was physically healthy but showed signs of prolonged stress and isolation. Her social development had been impacted by the lack of interaction with peers. She startled easily at loud noises and had developed some anxiety around strangers. But overall, the prognosis was good. With time, therapy, and the love of her family, Lily would heal. As the day wore on, the reality of what came next began to settle over everyone. There would be a trial. Lily might have to testify, though her age made that complicated. The media was already descending on Jacksonville, word having leaked about the dramatic rescue. Harding's life story was being dissected by news outlets across the country. But for now, in that reunion room at the Florida DCF, none of that mattered. What mattered was a family made whole again, a 3-year-old girl who'd survived the unthinkable, and a German Shepherd police dog who'd understood when a child said, "Help me." Jennifer held Lily in her lap, rocking her gently as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows. David sat beside them, his arm around his wife's shoulders, his hand resting on his daughter's back. "We're going home," Jennifer whispered into Lily's hair. "We're finally going home." "All of us together?" Lily asked, her voice drowsy with exhaustion and emotional overwhelm. "All of us together," David confirmed. "Forever. No one is ever going to take you away from us again." Outside the room, and Rex prepared to return to their duties, but knew he would carry this day with him for the rest of his life. The day a routine traffic stop became a miracle. The day 2 words from a brave little girl brought her home. Retrieve, the federal courthouse in Jacksonville, became the epicenter of one of the most closely watched kidnapping cases in recent American history. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Richardson, a veteran prosecutor with a 23-year track record, had been assigned to lead the case against Harding. His office had transformed into a war room, walls lined with evidence boards, timelines, and photographs documenting 14-month flight across 4 states with a stolen child. Richardson sat at his desk, reviewing the mountain of evidence his team had compiled in just 72 hours since Lily's recovery. It was overwhelming, and that was exactly what he wanted. This case needed to be airtight. Harding's defense attorney, Tom Harrison, was already laying groundwork for an insanity defense, and Richardson knew that sympathy for a grieving mother could sway a jury if he wasn't careful. "Let's go through this one more time," Richardson said to his team, which included FBI Special Agent Robert, Detective Sarah Michaels, and 2 junior prosecutors. "We need to prove premeditation. We need to show this wasn't a mental break or a moment of temporary insanity. This was calculated, planned, and executed with cold precision." Agent stepped forward, pointing to the timeline on the wall. 6 months before the kidnapping, Harding began purchasing supplies. "We've traced credit card receipts to a document forging kit bought online, a printer capable of producing fake IDs and laminating equipment. She wasn't having a psychotic episode, she was preparing." "What about the fake identities?" Richardson asked. "We've got her," confirmed. "Sarah Mitchell wasn't her only alias. We found evidence she'd created 3 different fake identities, complete with social security numbers, birth certificates, and driver's licenses. She researched how to do this online. We pulled her search history. How to create fake birth certificate, living off the grid with a child, states with weak homeschool regulations. This goes on for months." Detective Michaels added her findings. "We've interviewed landlords from 4 different states. Or Sarah Mitchell, as they knew her, always paid rent in cash, always 6 months up front. She chose apartments with month-to-month leases, no background checks, no questions asked. In Arizona, she lived in a complex known for attracting people who wanted to stay under the radar. In New Mexico, she rented a house so remote the nearest neighbor was 2 miles away." Richardson made notes. "What about the surveillance of the family?" "That's where it gets really damning," Michael said, pulling out a folder thick with documents. "We searched storage unit in Sacramento, the one she maintained even after leaving California. Inside, we found hundreds of photographs of Jennifer and Lily, photos taken at the park, at the grocery store, at the mall. We found a notebook with the family's complete schedule documented over 3 months. What time Jennifer left for work, what days she went to the mall, even what car seat she used. This wasn't opportunity. This was a planned military operation." One of the junior prosecutors, no relation to the victims, spoke up. The defense is going to argue that all this preparation was done while was in a state of diminished capacity due to grief and untreated mental illness. They'll say she wasn't thinking rationally. Which is why we need the psychiatric evaluation to be thorough, Richardson said firmly. Yes, Harding was grieving. Yes, she'd lost her daughter tragically. But grief doesn't give you a roadmap to kidnapping. She knew what she was doing was wrong. That's why she hid it so carefully. The team turned their attention to his mental health history. After her daughter Emma's drowning death, had been prescribed antidepressants and referred to therapy. She'd attended 8 sessions with a therapist named Dr. Laura before stopping treatment. We need to talk to Dr. Richardson said. What did tell her? Were there warning signs? Agent had already conducted that interview. Doctor is willing to testify, with appropriate waivers of doctor-patient confidentiality given the circumstances. She says exhibited signs of complicated grief and depression, but never expressed violent thoughts or plans to harm herself or others. Noted that became fixated on seeing children who resembled her deceased daughter. That's in the clinical notes. She recommended continued therapy, but stopped coming. So knew she needed help and chose not to get it, Richardson observed. That suggests rational decision-making, not psychosis. The psychiatric evaluation conducted by court-appointed psychiatrist Dr. Foster, had been completed. Dr. Foster's report was nuanced but ultimately damaging to the defense's position. He concluded that, while suffered from major depressive disorder and complicated grief, she did not meet the legal standard for insanity at the time of the kidnapping. She knew what she was doing was wrong, she understood the consequences, and she took elaborate steps to avoid detection, all indicators of rational, if criminal, thought processes. What about Lily's testimony? Asked carefully. She's only 3 years old, can we even use her? This was the most delicate aspect of the case. Richardson had consulted with child psychology experts and legal precedents. Children as young as 3 have in criminal cases, but it's extremely rare and controversial. Dr. Williams conducted forensic interviews with Lily using best practices, minimal leading questions, age-appropriate language, multiple sessions to ensure consistency. We have those interviews on video. But putting a 3-year-old on the stand, shook her head. The defense will tear her apart on cross-examination. They'll say she's been coached, that she doesn't understand the difference between truth and fantasy, that she's parroting what her parents told her. Richardson leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. This was his dilemma. Lily's testimony, particularly her statements about remembering her parents, about telling her she was Emma, about being kept isolated, was powerful evidence. But subjecting a traumatized child to cross-examination could be seen as victimizing her all over again. We have options, Richardson said finally. We can play the forensic interview videos without having Lily testify in person. Federal rules of evidence allow for this in cases involving child victims. The defense can challenge it, but I think we can get it admitted. The team spent the next several hours building the prosecution's narrative. It would be a story told in 3 acts: premeditation, execution, and flight. Act 1 would establish that Harding spent months planning Lily's kidnapping. The evidence was overwhelming: the fake IDs, the surveillance photos, the notebooks, the online searches, the cash withdrawals, the pre-rented apartments. This wasn't a crime of passion or a mental break. This was a woman who coldly calculated how to steal someone else's child and get away with it. Act 2 would detail the kidnapping itself. Security footage from the Sacramento Valley Fair Mall would show watching the family, following them, waiting for her opportunity. The 30-second window when Jennifer's back was turned. Swift, practiced unbuckling of the car seat. The speed with which she disappeared. The terror that followed when Jennifer realized Lily was gone. Act 3 would chronicle the 14 months of flight. 4 states, 8 different addresses, constant movement to avoid detection. Lily kept isolated, homeschooled, never allowed to interact with children her own age or anyone who might ask questions. The systematic attempt to erase Lily's identity and replace it with Emma Mitchell. And finally, the traffic stop in Jacksonville where Lily's courage and officers' instincts brought it all crashing down. "What's our biggest weakness?" Richardson asked his team. It was a question he always posed, better to identify vulnerabilities now than to be at trial. "The sympathy factor," Agent said immediately. "Harding lost her child tragically. Her husband abandoned her. She spiraled into depression. The defense is going to paint her as a victim of circumstance, a woman so broken by grief that she couldn't think clearly. Jurors, especially parents, might relate to the depth of her loss." Richardson nodded grimly. "Which is why we need to constantly remind the jury of the real victim here. Not Harding, but Lily. A 2-year-old child ripped from her parents' arms. Parents who spent 14 months in agony, not knowing if their daughter was alive or dead. A little girl who had to whisper her parents' names every night just to hold onto her identity." "We should have Jennifer and David testify," Detective Michaels suggested. "Let the jury see what this did to them. Let them understand the devastation caused to an innocent family." "Agreed," Richardson said. "We'll also bring in Officer and Rex. That moment when Lily said, 'Help me,' that's when this all unraveled for. That's when Lily saved herself. It's powerful testimony." The team compiled witness lists. Jennifer and David would testify about their daughter, about the kidnapping, about the 14 months of hell. Officer would describe the traffic stop, Lily's plea for help, Rex's unusual reaction. The landlords from 4 states would establish pattern of behavior. Dr. Williams would explain Lily's psychological state and her remarkable ability to retain her identity. Dr. Foster would address mental health and her legal sanity. And then there was the physical evidence, the fake IDs, the surveillance photos, the notebooks, online search history, the Amber Alert poster found in her trunk, a damning piece of evidence that showed she knew exactly who Lily was and that people were searching for her. "What about's testimony?" asked. "Will she take the stand?" "That's Tom Harrison's decision," Richardson said. "If she doesn't testify, the jury might hold it against her. They'll want to hear her explanation. If she does testify, we get to cross-examine her, and she'll have to answer for 14 months of lying to a child about her identity." Agent pulled out another folder. "There's one more piece of evidence we haven't discussed. Lily's statement about what told her, that her old parents didn't want her anymore, that Jennifer and David had given her away." The room fell silent. This was perhaps the aspect of crime, not just the physical kidnapping, but the psychological torture of trying to convince a 2-year-old that her parents had abandoned her. "That's malicious," Detective Michaels said, her voice tight with anger. "That's not the act of a grieving mother having a mental break. That's deliberate emotional abuse designed to break a child's spirit and erase her memory." Richardson made a note. "We emphasized this at trial. Didn't just take Lily's body. She tried to take her soul, her identity, her very sense of self. And the only reason she failed is because Lily, at 2 years old, was stronger than her kidnapper." As the meeting concluded, Richardson stood at his evidence board, studying the photographs of Lily. The Amber Alert photo from 14 months ago showing a chubby-cheeked toddler, and the recent photos from her recovery showing a thinner, older, but unbroken 3-year-old. "This case is about more than just punishment," Richardson said quietly. "It's about sending a message. You cannot steal a child, terrorize a family for over a year, and expect the legal system to excuse it because you're sad. Grief is not a license to destroy other people's lives." The trial was set to begin in 6 weeks. The media was already circling, national news outlets requesting courtroom access, true crime podcasts asking for interviews. The family had declined all media requests, focused entirely on Lily's recovery and adjustment. But soon, they would have to face their worst nightmare all over again, this time in a public courtroom, with Harding sitting just feet away, forcing them to relive every moment of those 14 months of hell. Richardson closed the case file and looked at his team. "We have one job: get justice for Lily, whatever it takes." The morning of October 15th dawned cool and clear over Jacksonville, but inside the federal courthouse, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Media trucks lined the streets, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like metallic flowers seeking the sun. Reporters jockeyed for position on the courthouse steps, their cameras trained on every person entering the building. The case of United States v. Harding had captivated the nation, and today, day 12 of the trial, would be its most dramatic moment yet. Inside courtroom 6A, every seat was filled. The mahogany-paneled room, built to impress with its high ceilings and imposing judge's bench, had never felt more claustrophobic. Spectators packed the gallery, journalists with notebooks, victim advocates wearing yellow ribbons for missing children, members of the public who'd waited in line since 5 a.m. for a chance to witness justice. Harding sat at the defense table, her appearance dramatically different from her. Gone was the disheveled, tear-stained woman who'd been arrested 4 months ago. Her attorney, Tom Harrison, had dressed her in a modest gray suit, her hair neatly styled, her demeanor carefully composed. She kept her eyes downcast, occasionally dabbing at them with a tissue, the picture of remorse. At the prosecution table, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Richardson organized his files with meticulous precision. This was the moment he'd been building toward for 11 days of testimony. Today, the jury would hear from Lily herself, not in person, but through the forensic interview videos recorded by Dr. Williams. Today, they would also see the demonstration that Officer and Rex had prepared. Today, everything would come together. Judge, a stern woman in her mid-60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing, entered the courtroom. Everyone rose. "Please be seated," Judge said, her voice carrying authority. "Mr. Richardson, I understand you have video testimony to present today." "Yes, Your Honor." Richardson stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "The United States calls the video testimony of Lily, recorded during forensic interviews conducted by Dr. Williams of the Florida Department of Children and Families." Tom Harrison rose immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. The defendant has the constitutional right to confront her accuser. Playing a video denies Ms. Harding that right." Judge had anticipated this objection. They'd argued it extensively in pretrial motions. "Mr. Harrison, we've been through this. Under Federal Rules of Evidence 807 and the Supreme Court's decision in v. Maryland, video testimony of child victims is permissible when live testimony would cause psychological trauma. I've reviewed Dr. Williams' assessment. The objection is overruled." Harrison sat down, his jaw tight. He knew he'd lose this argument, but he needed it on the record for appeal. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as a large screen descended from the ceiling. The jury of 7 women and 5 men leaned forward in their seats, their faces reflecting the blue glow of the screen. In the gallery, Jennifer gripped her husband David's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. They debated whether to attend today's session. Watching their daughter's testimony was going to be agonizing, but they needed to be here. For Lily. For justice. The video began. It showed a cheerful room with colorful murals, toys scattered across a soft carpet, and 2 figures. Dr. Williams, sitting cross-legged on the floor, and Lily, 3 years old, playing with building blocks. Rex lay nearby, his presence providing visible comfort to the child. Dr. Williams' gentle voice filled the courtroom. "Lily, can you tell me about the lady you were living with, the one you called the sad lady?" Lily continued stacking blocks, her small face serious with concentration. "She was nice sometimes, but she cried a lot. She said I was Emma, but that's not my name." "What is your name?" Dr. Williams asked. "Lily," the child said clearly, looking directly at the camera with those enormous blue eyes. "Mama and Dada named me Lily because lilies are Mama's favorite flowers." Several jurors reached for tissues. In the gallery, Jennifer pressed her hand to her mouth, suppressing a sob. "Did the sad lady tell you about Mama and Dada?" Dr. Williams continued. Lily's face clouded. "She said they didn't want me anymore. She said they gave me away because I was bad." The little girl's voice became very small. "But I knew that was a lie. Mama and Dada love me. They told me every day. Lily, you're our special girl." So I remembered. The courtroom was absolutely silent except for the video. Even the reporters had stopped scribbling in their notebooks, transfixed by the small child's testimony. "How did you remember, Lily?" Dr. Williams asked gently. "Every night after the sad lady went asleep, I whispered their names." Lily demonstrated, bringing her small hands to her mouth as if sharing a secret. Mama, Dada, I said it quiet so the sad lady wouldn't hear. And I remembered things, Mama's songs, Dada's tickles, our yellow kitchen, my elephant." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't want to forget. Mama taught me to remember things that are important, so I did." Richardson watched the jury. Several women were openly crying. Even the men looked shaken, their faces pale. One juror, a father of 3, had his hand over his heart. The video continued. Dr. Williams asked about the places Lily had lived, and the child described moving lots and lots, in terms a 3-year-old could understand. Different houses, different beds, never any friends to play with. She talked about homeschool lessons, about not being allowed to go to parks where other children played, about the sad lady always being scared of police officers. "But Mama told me something important," Lily said in the video, looking earnestly at Dr. Williams. "She said if I'm ever scared or lost, I should find a police officer because police officers help people. So when I saw the policeman with the doggy," she reached out to pet Rex, "I knew I should ask for help." "What did you say to the police officer?" Dr. Williams asked. "I said help me," Lily replied simply. "And Rex, that's the doggy's name, he came to my window. And the policeman officer, he helped me. He brought me back to my real Mama and Dada." The video showed Dr. Williams asking a few more questions, then it ended. The screen went dark and the courtroom lights came back up. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was profound, sacred almost, as if the entire courtroom was holding its breath. Judge cleared her throat. "Mr. Richardson." Richardson stood, gathering himself. "Your Honor, the United States now calls Officer and his K-9 partner, Rex, for a demonstration." A ripple of interest moved through the gallery. This was unprecedented, bringing a police dog into a federal courtroom for testimony. But Judge had approved it, recognizing that the jury needed to understand exactly what had happened during that traffic stop. The courtroom doors opened and entered in his full dress uniform, Rex walking perfectly at his side. The German Shepherd's presence was commanding, alert, professional, powerful. Several jurors sat up, watching the dog with fascination and respect. Took the witness stand and Rex sat beside him, his intelligent eyes surveying the room. After being sworn in about the traffic stop, the broken taillight, Sarah Mitchell's nervousness, the little girl in the back seat watching Rex with unusual intensity. "Officer, what happened when you approached the vehicle?" Richardson asked. "Rex started behaving unusually," explained. "He's a highly trained K-9 officer, and I'd never seen him act that way before. He was pulling toward the car, whimpering, his attention completely fixed on the child in the back seat. Then the little girl pressed her hands against the window and said 2 words. What words were those? "Help me," said his voice quiet but clear. She said, "Help me." Richardson walked closer to the witness stand. "Can you demonstrate for the jury how Rex responded?" "Yes, sir." Stood and Rex immediately came to attention. "Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to recreate the scene as closely as possible." Judge nodded. "Proceed." A staff member wheeled in a car door frame that had been set up for this purpose. Positioned Rex several feet away, then had a young female bailiff, chosen because she was small and could represent a child, sit behind the window, which had been covered with. When Lily said, "Help me," Rex responded like this, explained. He gave Rex a subtle hand signal, and the dog immediately moved to the car door, his entire demeanor changing from alert professional to gentle protector. Rex placed his head near where the child sat, his tail wagging slowly, his body language completely non-threatening. "This is not standard police K9 behavior," continued. "Rex is trained to search for narcotics, to track suspects, to respond to threats. But this," he gestured to Rex's gentle posture, "this was something else. It was as if he understood that this child needed help, needed comfort. It's what prompted me to look more carefully at the situation." Richardson approached the demonstration. "And what did you find when you looked more carefully?" "Evidence that Lily had been kidnapped 14 months earlier and was living under a false identity with a woman who wasn't her mother." The jury absorbed this, and Richardson could see the pieces clicking together in their minds. The child's testimony, the desperate plea for help, the dog's intuitive response, the officer's instincts. It all painted a picture of a little girl who had survived an ordeal through remarkable courage and resilience. Tom Harrison cross-examined, trying to establish that the traffic stop had been routine, that hadn't been driving erratically, that there was no probable cause for the extended search. But's testimony was unshakable. "The child's words helped me had established probable cause. Everything that followed was lawful." After step down, Richardson called Dr. Williams to authenticate the video and explain her forensic interview techniques. That Lily's statements were consistent across multiple interviews, that the child had not been coached, that her memory of her parents and her identity was genuine and deeply rooted. "Dr. Williams," Richardson asked, "in your professional opinion, how did a 2-year-old child manage to maintain her identity and memory of her parents through 14 months of someone trying to convince her otherwise?" Dr. Williams looked at the jury. The bond between Lily and her parents in those first 2 years was extraordinarily strong. They clearly communicated love to her constantly, taught her her name and their names, created a foundation of security. That foundation was stronger than 14 months of manipulation. Lily held onto her identity because her parents had made it an unshakable part of who she was. Richardson returned to his table and picked up one final piece of evidence: the crumpled Amber Alert poster found in his trunk. He held it up for the jury to see. Ladies, and Harding kept this poster. She knew who Lily really was. She knew Jennifer and David were searching desperately for their daughter. She saw the news coverage, read the pleas from grieving parents, and she continued to hide Lily anyway. This wasn't mental illness. This wasn't a grief-stricken moment of madness. This was a calculated choice, repeated every single day for 14 months to keep a child from her family. He let that statement hang in the air, then turned to the judge. "The United States rests, Your Honor." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. In that moment, everyone understood the weight of what they'd witnessed: a 3-year-old's extraordinary courage, a family's unbearable suffering, and one woman's crime that had stolen 14 months from all of them. Harding, sitting at the defense table, finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. But it was too late for tears. The truth had been told and justice was waiting. 3 weeks after the prosecution rested, the jury filed back into courtroom 6A after deliberating for just 6 hours. The speed of their decision sent a clear message: this case had never really been in doubt. Harding stood between her attorneys, her face ashen, her hands trembling as the jury foreman, a 62-year-old retired teacher named Williams, rose to deliver the verdict. "On the count of kidnapping, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of interstate flight to avoid prosecution, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of falsifying federal documents, we find the defendant guilty." The words echoed through the packed courtroom like thunder. Knees buckled, and Tom Harrison had to support her weight as she collapsed against him, sobbing. In the gallery, Jennifer buried her face in David's shoulder, her body shaking, not with tears of sadness this time, but with the overwhelming relief of justice finally delivered. Judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, giving both sides time to prepare their statements. Those 2 weeks passed in a blur of media coverage, public debate, and intense scrutiny of every aspect of the case. Mental health advocates argued about the treatment of grief and trauma. Child safety organizations used Lily's case to push for enhanced Amber Alert systems. And across America, parents held their children a little, thanking God it hadn't been them. On November 12th, the courtroom reconvened for sentencing. This time, Jennifer and David sat in the front row, ready to deliver their victim impact statements. Behind them sat in his dress uniform, Rex lying calmly at his feet. Dr. Williams was there, along with FBI agent and Detective Sarah Michaels. The prosecution team had become a family of sorts, bound together by their commitment to Lily's justice. Judge called the court to order, her expression grave. "Before I impose sentence, I'll hear from the victims. Mrs., if you're ready." Jennifer stood on shaking legs and approached the podium. She'd written her statement longhand on 3 pages of notebook paper, but as she stood there looking at Harding, the woman who'd stolen 14 months of her daughter's life, the prepared words felt inadequate. "Your Honor," Jennifer began, her voice cracking but determined. "On June 15th of last year, my world ended. I was at the mall with my daughter buying supplies for her 3rd birthday party. I was on the phone with my mother, laughing about cake flavors, when Harding stole my baby from her car seat. In the 30 seconds my back was turned, this woman destroyed our family." She paused, wiping tears from her eyes. "The next 14 months were a living hell. Every morning I woke up wondering if Lily was alive, if she was scared, if she remembered us. Every night I went to bed tormented by images of what might be happening to her. I visited the police station 3 times a week. I printed 10,000 flyers and drove across 5 states posting them. I appeared on news programs begging for information. And every single day I died a little more inside." Jennifer's voice grew stronger. "But the worst part wasn't what Harding did to me and my husband. The worst part was what she did to Lily. She tried to erase our daughter's identity. She told a 2-year-old child that her parents had abandoned her, that we didn't want her anymore. She tried to steal not just Lily's body, but her soul, her memories, her very sense of who she was." She turned slightly to look directly at who couldn't meet her eyes. "But she failed, because my daughter is stronger than her kidnapper. At 2 years old, Lily held onto her identity through sheer force of will. She whispered our names every night so she wouldn't forget. And when she saw a chance to be saved, she was brave enough to ask for help. My daughter survived you, Ms. Harding, and she'll thrive in spite of you." Jennifer returned to her seat, and David stood to take his turn. His statement was shorter but no less powerful, describing the helplessness of being unable to protect his child, the guilt of not being there when she needed him, and the joy of holding her again after 14 months of agony. "My daughter lost 14 months of her childhood because of Harding's selfish choice," David said, his voice thick with emotion. 14 months she can never get back. 14 months of birthday parties, holidays, first days of preschool with friends, all stolen. I'm asking this court to ensure that Harding faces the full consequences of what she's done." Tom Harrison then stood to present mitigation evidence for. He called a psychiatrist who about major depressive disorder, her untreated grief, the tragedy of losing her daughter Emma. He presented letters from former friends and family members describing a kind woman destroyed by loss. He argued that needed treatment, not punishment, and that a lengthy prison sentence would serve no purpose. Finally, herself was given the opportunity to speak. She stood, her face swollen from crying, and faced Judge. "Your Honor, there's nothing I can say that will make this right," began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I took Lily because I thought I could replace the daughter I lost. I thought if I just had a child to love again, the pain would stop, but I was wrong, so wrong." She turned toward Jennifer and David. "I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. What I did to your family and to Lily was monstrous. I spent 14 months trying to convince Lily she was my daughter, but she never forgot you. She was braver and stronger than I ever was." His voice broke completely. "I lost my Emma and nothing can bring her back. But I took your Lily and for that I can never forgive myself. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She sat down, her entire body shaking with sobs. Judge waited until the courtroom settled, then spoke. "Harding, I've presided over criminal cases for 23 years. I've seen crimes of passion, crimes of greed, crimes of desperation. What you did falls into a category all its own." The judge's voice was cold, measured. "You didn't just kidnap a child in a moment of madness. You planned this crime for months. You created fake identities, researched how to evade law enforcement, and targeted a specific family. When you took Lily from her car seat, you knew exactly what you were doing." Judge continued, her eyes fixed on. "The psychiatric evaluations show that while you suffer from depression and grief, you understood right from wrong. You knew this was a crime. You knew Jennifer and David would be devastated. You knew Lily belonged with her family. But you did it anyway because your pain mattered more to you than theirs." The courtroom was silent as a tomb. What makes this case particularly egregious is the psychological manipulation of a 2-year-old child. You didn't just take her body. You tried to erase her identity. You told her that her parents had abandoned her. You moved her constantly, kept her isolated, her the chance to develop normally. The only reason Lily survived with her identity intact is because of the extraordinary bond her parents built with her in her first 2 years, and because of her own remarkable resilience. Judge opened the sentencing guidelines document. The federal sentencing guidelines recommend 20 to 30 years for kidnapping involving a child victim. The government has asked for the maximum sentence. The defense has asked for leniency. I've considered both positions carefully." She looked up, her expression stern. "Harding, I hereby sentence you to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. You will also serve 5 years of supervised release following your prison term. This sentence reflects the severity of your crime, the vulnerability of your victim, and the calculated nature of your actions." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. 35 years, would be 63 years old before she could even be considered for parole. Tom Harrison put his arm around his sobbing client as Judge continued. "I want to be clear about something," the judge said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Grief is not a license to destroy other people's lives. Loss, no matter how profound, does not give you the right to inflict that same loss on others. You chose to heal your pain by creating pain for an innocent family. That choice has consequences." She banged her gavel. "This court is adjourned." As court officers led away in handcuffs, Jennifer and David held each other, tears streaming down both their faces. It was over. Finally, mercifully, it was over. 2 years later. Lily, now 5 years old, sat in the backyard of her Sacramento home, laughing as she chased butterflies through the garden her mother had planted. Her hair, longer now, flew behind her like a banner. She wore a yellow sundress and light-up sneakers that flashed with every step. To any observer, she looked like a normal, happy kindergartner, which, miraculously, was exactly what she was. Inside the house, Jennifer watched through the kitchen window, a smile on her face. The past 2 years had been challenging. There had been nightmares, therapy sessions, moments of regression when Lily would ask fearfully if the sad lady could come back. But with time, professional help, and an ocean of love, Lily had healed. She'd started preschool, made friends, learned to ride a bike. The trauma would always be part of her story, but it didn't define her. David came up behind his wife, wrapping his arms around her waist. "She's amazing," he said softly. "She really is," Jennifer agreed. "Dr. Williams says she's thriving. Her social development is right on track now. You'd never know." She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what she meant. On the refrigerator hung a newspaper clipping from 6 months ago. The headline read, "Lily's law passes in 12 states, enhanced Amber Alert system to prevent cold cases." Jennifer had before state legislatures, sharing Lily's story and pushing for changes that would prevent other children from being lost in the system. The law mandated better interstate communication for Amber Alerts, dedicated cold case units for missing children, and enhanced resources for families of long-term missing children. "Mom, Dad," Lily called from the backyard. "Can Rex come visit soon? I miss him." Jennifer smiled. "This weekend, sweetie. Officer is bringing him on Saturday." The relationship between Lily and Rex had become something special. Brought Rex to visit once a month, and the bond between the child and the dog remained strong. Lily was convinced that Rex was a hero doggy, and in truth, she wasn't wrong. Had become something of a celebrity in law enforcement circles. He'd been awarded the Medal of Valor, the highest honor in the Jacksonville Police Department. He'd appeared on news programs and at conferences, sharing Lily's story and advocating for enhanced K-9 training in child recovery cases. The Lily Protocol, as it was informally known, was being adopted by police departments across the country, specialized training for K-9 units to recognize signs of child distress and trafficking. But for the greatest reward was seeing Lily thriving. Every month when he brought Rex to visit, watching her play with the dog and seeing her smile made every long night and difficult case worthwhile. Jennifer's phone buzzed with a notification. It was from the Never Stop Searching Foundation, the organization she'd founded to help families of missing children. They'd just reached a milestone. They'd assisted in the recovery of their 10th missing child, a 6-year-old boy who'd been taken by a non-custodial parent and hidden for 8 months. 10 children, Jennifer said aloud, showing David the notification. 10 families who don't have to go through what we went through. The foundation provided resources, private investigators, legal support, and emotional counseling to families of missing children. It kept cases in the public eye, maintained pressure on law enforcement, and ensured that no case went cold due to lack of resources. Jennifer had turned her pain into purpose, and it was saving lives. That evening, as Jennifer tucked Lily into bed, her daughter looked up at her with those enormous blue eyes, so much older and wiser than they should be at 5 years old. "Mama, do you think the sad lady is okay?" Lily asked quietly. Jennifer's heart clenched. Even after everything, Lily had compassion for Harding. Dr. Williams said it was normal. Children often worried about the adults in their lives, even those who'd hurt them. "I think the sad lady is where she needs to be," Jennifer said carefully, smoothing Lily's hair. "She did something very wrong and she has to face the consequences. But you don't need to worry about her, sweetheart. You're safe, you're home, and you're never ever going to be taken away from us again." Lily nodded, accepting this. Then she smiled. "Mama, tell me again about how I was brave." Jennifer smiled, settling onto the edge of the bed. This had become their bedtime ritual, recounting the story of Lily's courage, reframing her trauma as a tale of strength and survival. "Well," Jennifer began, "once upon a time, there was the bravest little girl in the whole world. Even when she was scared, even when someone tried to make her forget who she was, she held onto her memories. She whispered her parents' names every night like a magic spell, and when she saw a chance to be saved, she was brave enough to say 2 very important words. "Help me," Lily finished, smiling. "And Rex the hero doggy heard me, and Officer saved me, and I came home to you and Daddy." "That's exactly right, my brave, smart, beautiful girl," Jennifer said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "And you lived happily ever after." As Lily drifted off to sleep, Jennifer stood in the doorway watching her daughter breathe, a sight she'd never take for granted again. In the living room, David was on the phone with a journalist, discussing an upcoming piece about Lily's law. In Sacramento and across the country, other families were receiving help from the foundation, hope from the story of a little girl who'd survived the unthinkable. Harding would spend decades in prison, her life effectively over at age 28. But Lily, brave, resilient, extraordinary Lily, was just beginning hers. She would grow up knowing her own strength, understanding that love could survive even the darkest circumstances, and carrying the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is ask for help. The nightmare that began with a 30-second distraction at a mall parking lot had ended with justice, healing, and hope. And every time Jennifer tucked her daughter into bed, every time David heard Lily's laughter in the backyard, every time they watched her play with Rex or hug Officer, they were reminded that miracles do happen. Sometimes, all it takes is 2 words from a brave 3-year-old and a police dog who understood. "Help me." Those 2 words had changed everything, and they would echo through the years as a testament to courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between a child and her family, a bond that not even 14 months of captivity could destroy. The end.